Hey, this is Dan. Welcome to Weld Fever. On today's episode, we're going to do some overhead stick welding with 7018 rod. So stick with me. Here we go. Okay, just like the last 7018 video I did on vertical, I want to start off by talking about body positioning when doing an overhead weld. A lot of people think that just because the weld is called an overhead weld, that you have to position the plate literally over your head. And that is not true, I'm here to tell you. The reality is that an overhead weld is actually just a weld that's done upside down. And it does not have to literally be over your head. In fact, if you do it over your head, you're probably going to wind up with a lot of trouble, especially when you're going for a while, because having to do something that's over your head requires you then to lift your arms and shoulders in a very uncomfortable position. And like we've talked about before, comfort, being in a comfortable position is probably one of the most important things in welding outside of being able to see. So what I'm going to suggest when you weld overhead is that your plate should be no higher than your forehead. I think that is a perfect position because it allows you to take an open stance and kind of duck a little bit without having to bend over or without having to stretch too high. I can brace here and I can come in and I can do my weld in a very comfortable position, a very comfortable posture. I'm not having to bend over, I'm not having to do anything crazy here. Now if you'll observe, I've got this piece here to lean on, but if I didn't have this, I might use part of my my vice grip or some other type of device to prop myself on, or just like in vertical, I could hold on and tuck my hand in and do it one-handed, which I may just do this time. I suggest that when you use your stinger in this particular application of overhead, that you place the electrodes straight up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, I'm going to strike, and then I'm going to hit, and you'll notice as I come across, even as the electrode is burned and I'm having to raise up, my body position is very comfortable, even to the very end. And you see I'm barely having to raise my arm. If I actually come to the end of the weld, that's as far as I'll go. Not very much play for my arm, which keeps me in a very comfortable position the entire time from beginning to end. So I can't stress it enough. Make sure that before you do this, you set yourself up no taller than your forehead. Make sure you're in a comfortable stance, that you're not bent over too much, that you're not crooked back, that you're not having to squat in here and really get in, and that you're especially not having to reach for the stars. None of those things will be helpful. In fact, they will cause you probably to have poorer welds than you would if you were comfortable. One other thing I'm going to mention about positioning and about actually completing the weld. I personally prefer to weld from back to front. So from the rear coming towards me. I feel that doing it this way I can see everything that's happening. I know there's a school of thought that believes that because the rod is going to be up here in front of the actual weld and puddle that you're not going to be able to see what's going on. Personally, I feel I can. I feel I have enough control of it. I feel I can see enough of the puddle. I think by feel I can also come across, and I just feel more comfortable doing it that way. And in doing it that way, I'm successful in completing the weld. So here's one of those things that it really depends upon you, the user, what you're more comfortable with. If you don't like this because you feel you can't see that weld puddle enough, fine. Come over and do it sideways. And if you do it sideways, in that instance, maybe you might want to change the rod location of the stinger and come in something like this. The only caution I would have about doing something like this is you can see how I'm crooked to the side here, which is going to cause me some discomfort in my back, especially for a prolonged period of time. In that instance, what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to raise this higher, which is then going to cause me to stretch. Personally, I have not found a more comfortable, more natural position than to weld at this height and level that I spoke of earlier, with the electrode straight up and with the plate not much higher than the forehead. You be the judge. You try any way you feel is best for you. but I think you're going to find that this particular position works best. The next thing I want to discuss is your welding helmet. Now, it doesn't really matter what kind of helmet you have. What does matter is that your lens is clean, that you can see through it. Now, mine's a little scratchy. It's got a little bit of splatter on there, but it's nothing outrageous. I have seen helmets that are so completely charred over and burnt and scratched and dusty dirty because, you know, the smoke that's generated from welding actually forms like a layer of dust on your welding mask. And I've seen people that continue to weld over and over with their mask completely clouded over. Trying to weld with a dirty mask is just a terrible idea. It's not going to come out good. So what I suggest to you all is have some extra lenses, because these lenses do have to be replaced from time to time. One lens is not going to last the lifetime of your helmet. You are going to have to change them up. But in between the times that you change them up, use some glass cleaner, use a plastic polishing compound to get some of the fine scratches out. Use whatever it is that you use when you would clean glass or similar type surfaces, and keep it clean inside and out. And if you have trouble with your lenses fogging on the inside, try some kind of an anti-fog cleaner. A lot of times when you have excessive fogging inside the helmet, it's because the assembly that holds the lenses in place and the darkening element aren't put in properly. A lot of times they have some rubber seals and gaskets that need to be put in just right, and if they're not put in properly, some moisture and some vapor can get in behind them, causing fogging. So make sure that all your stuff fits in there securely, and hopefully you'll be okay. Anyway, off to our welding. Okay, so I'm getting ready to light up here on this cruciform, and I've lit up at the end, as you can see. And I'm going to very easily and gently bring the rod toward me. Now, it's kind of hard to tell from this angle, but I think you can see it. If you look at the leading edge of the weld puddle, or the molten area there, it's pretty clear you can see what's going on. I know that a lot of people object to this position going from front to back because you can't see, but I think even in this shot it's pretty apparent that you can see what's going on, and I've never had any trouble seeing the weld puddle, and so that's why I continue to do it this way, because it's the most comfortable and it definitely works out well. Now you can see my travel speed here is I would say moderate to slow, not very fast at all, but I'm about to complete the weld, and basically that was a 6-inch piece that I went across, and it took me that long. Now I wanted to show you how I cleaned up this baby, because it did come off, the slag came off very easily, which is always indicative of a good weld, but unfortunately it was too dark, so I'm just showing you the after effect here. The weld bead looks good. Good penetration on the sides, no undercut. Couldn't be happier with it. So now we'll move on to the next bead, which is going to be right next to this one. Once again, I fire up at the rear and I start coming across. Again, this is the same length, 6 inches, so you're going to see just how slowly I go. The most important element when doing the second beads over the initial bead, the cover passes, is to make sure you both lay into the side of the plate to prevent undercut, and to come over to about midway, at least midway into the first bead. That way you're sure to wash the puddle in, the molten metal, into the initial bead and also into the side of the plate. Very important in order to achieve a true flatness across the plate. That time it went a little bit quicker because you know, second and third passes always seem to go a little bit faster. It's that initial pass that takes a little bit longer because you're really trying to burn into both sides of the plate, particularly on a cruciform. Okay, so now I've lit up on the second pass, and the second pass is to the right of, this is actually the third pass, and it's to the right of the second pass that I just did. This time I'm trying to hold into the right side of the plate as well as come into about halfway into the second pass, which is just left of me here. I hope that's not all too confusing, but the point of this is to try to wash
your passes into the side of the plate and into the previous pass. That's the whole point. Once again, you couldn't really see my removing the slag, which came off extremely easily. It just almost peeled off. But here is a nice close-up. You're going to notice at the end of the weld is a little porosity, and I'll talk about that more later. Okay, so now I've sped this up because I'm going to run 3 more passes to make them my final passes. And since we've already gone through this, I just figured I'd get this nice and fast here so you can actually see it, but yet we won't spend too much time on it. First pass went in, it was to the far left. Slag came off really easily again, which I was very pleased, and this time it was a nice flat burning into the plate. By the way, if I hadn't mentioned it before, I set my amperage for this particular 1/8 electrode. This is a 1A7018. I started off initially at 110 amps, but I found that for whatever reason it wasn't quite enough. Usually that's my amperage of choice. But I went ahead and cranked it up a little bit to 115 amps, and it seemed to burn in just right. I also want to mention that when you're welding overhead, the main objective in terms of your arc length is to get that electrode as close to the plate as humanly possible without snuffing it out. I mean, you want to really just try to jam that thing in there. But just be cautious that if you jam it in too far, you're likely to either snuff out your electrode or possibly even puncture through the plate, depending upon the thickness and how high your amps are set to. So this is the second pass, which went in right next to the first one. And I'm talking about second pass for this round, for this cover. I started at the far left, that last pass was in the middle, and this one's on the far right. And I found that at this particular juncture, 3 passes covered the entire length perfectly. And of course the goal here is to try to get these beads to fuse into one continuous molten looking weld that ends up being just a nice flat pad.
Okay, and this is the finished weld after we completed our passes. I did several passes, as you saw earlier, and this is what the end result is. Now I'm pretty happy with this for a few different reasons. Number one, there's no undercut. The sides are fused in, I should say the weld beads are fused into the sides well, and overall across the top the face is flat. You see when I pan down here, you'll look right across the face and you don't see individual beads. All you see is just one big flat deposit of weld. Now there are a couple areas here that I'm not happy with. The first one being at the very start of the weld, I had a little issue with porosity there. I don't know if you can quite see it on the camera, but it looks like it's a little bit pitted, and so that's not good. When I first lit up on the very first pass, I had a little trouble getting in there because I didn't want to bump the camera and knock it over, so I ended up coming back over it and I trapped some slag in there, and that slag that has been trapped doesn't go away. In fact, what happens is every time you go over slag, it just comes, it bubbles right up to the surface all over again and causes these little pits, which is known as porosity. So I'm sorry to have done it because I would have liked to have had a perfect weld, but it's actually a good thing to show you so that you'll understand what's happening if this happens to you. Again, I'll show you the face one last time. Flat, perfectly flat face across this cruciform. And there you have it. Listen, I hope you all enjoyed this one. Please make sure to rate, comment, and subscribe. I like hearing everybody's comments and I like to see what everybody's up to. Stay tuned for the next episode coming soon. Probably do some of this stuff with MIG, vertical and overhead. And thanks again for all your support, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.